and Julie Tsirkin on Capitol Hill. So, Josh, taking up the voting rights legislation Tuesday, even with the announcements from Senators Manchin and Sinema.
Yeah, well, look, Majority Leader Schumer announced the postponement of these votes because of something that's preventing the rest of the country from doing business as usual, and that's, of course, a COVID case among senators. But look, regardless when this vote would be held on those two voting rights bills, now, look, Republicans would push back on that because, of course, as McConnell, Minority Leader McConnell, the Republican leader here in the Senate, embraced reforming the Electoral Count Act, there's a group of Republicans and Democrats working on this bipartisan legislation. As Senator Susan Collins, who's leading the charge in that group, told me this week, it includes things like hiring more poll workers, preventing that election officials won't be faced with intimidation as they do their work in the states, and, of course, other measures that they're working to do. But Democrats pushing back on that, saying it's not an adequate replacement to voting rights legislation, and it would take far too long to do in this midterm year to protect the elections we have coming up around the corner. And now advocates I'm hearing from, of course, frustrated, back to what Josh was saying there, that the president's agenda, the Democratic leadership, is hitting a wall. Of course, when they decided to shift from Build Back Better to voting rights, I heard many say that that was an impossible task as well because of those two senators who were unwilling to move on Build Back Better and now unwilling to carve out the filibuster to pass voting rights on a simple majority. But of course, Schumer promised to do a vote on voting rights and that rules change, even though both will fail next week.
All right, Julie Tsirkin, thank you so much.
Is joining us from Capitol Hill. Julie, welcome on this Saturday. So how are these battles playing out?
Alex, let's start with the big development coming from the Justice Department, who charged more than 700 people in connection with the Capitol riot over the last year, but this week bringing their most. Many are not surprised that McCarthy will not cooperate voluntarily because if Democrats lose the House in this upcoming midterm election, he has a real chance to take on the gavel as Speaker of the House. And of course, he needs to win over the Trump allies in the House. And if he chooses to cooperate voluntarily, you and I could both imagine that statement that would come from former President Trump criticizing the leader. But also, as the committee weighs to subpoena him, that could prove big political and legal ramifications in the coming months if they choose to go down that road. Of course, they're interested in the Republican leader because he spoke to the former president on January 6th in an expletive-filled phone call. He, a few weeks later, of course, put some blame on the former president for those rioters that stormed the Capitol, walking that back a few short months later. So we'll see how this all plays out in the next coming weeks.
Oh, how quickly he's forgotten. Okay, thank you so much.